X the Belvedere divan. Beginning day had reduced night to a thin smokiness when Spade sat up. At his side Bridget. O'Shaughnessy's soft breathing had the regularity of utter sleep. Spade was quiet, leaving bed and bedroom and shutting the bedroom door. He dressed in the bathroom. Then he examined the sleeping girl's clothes, took a flat brass key from the pocket of her coat, and went out. He went to the coronet, letting himself into the building and into her apartment with the key. To the eye there was nothing furtive about his going in. He entered boldly and directly. To the ear his going in was almost unnoticeable. He made as little sound as might be. In the girl's apartment he switched on all the lights. He searched the place from wall to wall. His eyes and thick fingers moved without apparent haste, and without ever lingering or fumbling or going back, from one inch of their fields to the next, probing, scrutinizing, testing. With expert certainty. Every drawer, cupboard, cubbyhole, box, bag, trunk locked or unlocked was opened and its contents subjected to examination by eyes and fingers. Every piece of clothing was tested by hands that felt for telltale bulges and ears that listened for the crinkle of paper between pressing fingers. He stripped the bed of bedclothes. He looked under rugs and at the underside of each piece of furniture. He pulled down blinds to see that nothing had been rolled up in them for concealment. He leaned through windows to see that nothing hung below them on the outside. He poked with a fork into powder and cream jars on the dressing table. He held atomizers and bottles up against the light. He examined dishes and pans and food containers. He emptied the garbage can on spreadsheets of newspaper. He opened the top of the flush box in the bathroom, drained the box, and peered down into it. He examined and tested the metal screens over the drains of bathtub, wash bowl, sink, and laundry tub. He did not find the blackbird. He found nothing that seemed to have any connection with a blackbird. The only piece of writing he found was a week-old receipt for the month's apartment rent Bridget O'Shaughnessy had paid. The only thing he found that interested him enough to delay his search while he hooked at it was a double handful of rather fine jewelry in a polychrome box in a locked dressing table drawer. When he had finished he made and drank a cup of coffee. Then he unlocked the kitchen window, scarred the edge of its hock a little with his pocket knife, opened the window over a fire escape, got his hat and overcoat from the settee in the living room, and left the apartment as he had come. On his way home he stopped at a store that was being opened by a puffy-eyed, shivering, plump grocer amid bought oranges, eggs, rolls, butter, and cream. Spade went quietly into his apartment, but before he had shut the corridor door behind him Bridget O'Shaughnessy cried, "Who is that?" Young Spade bearing breakfast. "Oh, you frightened me." The bedroom door he had shut was open. The girl sat on the side of the bed, trembling, with her right hand out of sight under a pillow. Spade put his packages on the kitchen table and went into the bedroom. He sat on the bed beside the girl, kissed her smooth shoulder, and said, "I wanted to see if that kid was still on the job, and to get stuff for breakfast." "Is he?" "No." She sighed and leaned against him. "I awakened and you weren't here, and then I heard someone coming in. I was terrified." Spade combed her red hair back from her face with his fingers and said, "I'm sorry, Angel. I thought you'd sleep through it." "Did you have that gun under your pillow all night?" "No. You know I didn't. I jumped up and got it when I was frightened." He cooked breakfast and slipped the flat brass key into her coat pocket again while she bathed and dressed. She came out of the bathroom whistling Ann Cuba. "Shall I make the bed?" she asked. "That'd be swell. The eggs need a couple of minutes more." Their breakfast was on the table when she returned to the kitchen. They sat where they had sat the night before and ate heartily. "Now about the bird," Spade suggested presently as they ate. She put her fork down and looked at him. She drew her eyebrows together and made her mouth small and tight. "You can't ask me to talk about that this morning of all mornings," she protested. "I don't want to and I won't." "It's a stubborn damned hussy," he said sadly and put a piece of roll into his mouth. The youth who had shadowed Spade was not in sight when Spade and Bridget O'Shaughnessy crossed the sidewalk to the waiting taxicab. The taxicab was not followed. Neither the youth nor another loiterer was visible in the vicinity of the coronet when the taxicab arrived. There, Bridget O'Shaughnessy would not let Spade go in with her. It's bad enough to be coming home in evening dress at this hour without bringing company. I hope I don't meet anybody. Dinner tonight? Yes. They kissed. She went into the coronet. He told the chauffeur, Hotel Belvedere. When he reached the Belvedere he saw the youth who had shadowed him sitting in the lobby on a divan from which the elevators could be seen. Apparently the youth was reading a newspaper. At the desk Spade learned that Cairo was not in. He frowned and pinched his lower lip. Points of yellow light began to dance in his eyes. Thanks, he said softly to the clerk and turned away. Sauntering, he crossed the hobby to the divan from which the elevators could be seen and sat down beside not more than a foot from the young man who was apparently reading a newspaper. The young man did not look up from his newspaper. Seen at this scant distance, he seemed certainly less than 20 years old. His features were small, in keeping with his stature, and regular. His skin was very fair. The whiteness of his cheeks was as little blurred by any considerable growth of beard as by the glow of blood. His clothing was neither new nor of more than ordinary quality, but it, and his manner of wearing it, was marked by a hard masculine neatness. Spade asked casually, "Where is he?" while shaking tobacco down into a brown paper. "Curved to catch it?" The boy lowered his paper and looked around, moving with a purposeful sort of slowness, as of a more natural swiftness restrained. He looked with small hazel eyes under somewhat long curling lashes at Spade's chest. He said, in a voice as colorless and composed and cold as his young face, "What? Where is he?" Spade was busy with his cigarette. "Who?" "The fairy." The hazel eyes gaze went up Spade's chest to the knot of his maroon tie and rested there. "What do you think you're doing, Jack?" the boy demanded. "Kidding me? I'll tell you when I am." Spade licked his cigarette and smiled amiably at the boy. "New York, aren't you?" The boy stared at Spade's tie and did not speak. Spade nodded as if the boy had said yes, and asked, "Baume's Rush?" The boy stared at Spade's tie for a moment longer, then raised his newspaper and returned his attention to it. "Shove off," he said from the side of his mouth. Spade lighted his cigarette, leaned back comfortably on the divan, and spoke with good-natured carelessness, "You'll have to talk to me before you're through, sonny, some of you will, and you can tell G. I said so." The boy put his paper down quickly and faced Spade, staring at his necktie with bleak hazel eyes. The boy's small hands were spread flat over his belly. "Keep asking for it and you're going to get it," he said, "plenty." His voice was low and flat and menacing. "I told you to shove off. Shove off." Spade waited until a bespectacled pudgy man and a thin-legged blonde girl had passed out of hearing. Then he chuckled and said, "That would go over big back on 7th Avenue. But you're not in Romeville now. You're in my burg." He inhaled cigarette smoke and blew it out in a long pale cloud. "Well, where is he?" The boy spoke two words, the first a short guttural verb, the second you people hose teeth talking like that. Spade's voice was still amiable though his face had become wooden. "If you want to hang around you'll be polite." The boy repeated his two words. Spade dropped his cigarette into a tall stone jar beside the divan and with a lifted hand caught the attention of a man who had been standing at an end of the cigar stand for several minutes. The man nodded and came towards them. He was a middle-aged man of medium height, round and sallow of face, compactly built, tidily dressed in dark clothes. "Hello, Sam," he said as he came up. "Hello, Luke." They shook hands and Luke said, "Say, that's too bad about Miles." "Uh-huh, a bad break." Spade jerked his head to indicate the boy on the divan beside him. "What do you let these cheap gunmen hang out in your lobby for, with their tools bulging their clothes?" "Yes." Luke examined the boy with crafty brown eyes set in a suddenly hard face. What do you want here, he asked. The boy stood up. Spade stood up. The boy looked at the two men, at their neckties, from one to the other. Luke's necktie was black. The boy looked like a schoolboy standing in front of them. Luke said, "Well, if you don't want anything, beat it, and don't come back." The boy said, "I won't forget you guys," and went out. They watched him go out. Spade took off his hat and wiped his damp forehead with a handkerchief. The hotel detective asked, "What is it?" "Damned if I know," Spade replied. "I just happened to spot him." "Know anything about Joel Cairo 635? "Oh, that one." The hotel detective leered. "How long's he been here?" 4 days. This is the 5th. "What about him?" "Search me, Sam. I got nothing against him but his looks. Find out if he came in last night." "Try to," the hotel detective promised and went away. Spade sat on the divan until he returned. "No," Luke reported, "he didn't sleep in his room." "What is it?" "Nothing. Come clean. You know I'll keep my clam shut, but if there's anything wrong we ought to know about it so's we can collect our bill." "Nothing like that," Spade assured him. "As a matter of fact, I'm doing a little work for him. I'd tell you if he was wrong." "You'd better. Want me to kind of keep an eye on him?" "Thanks, Luke. It wouldn't hurt. You can't know too much about the men you're working for these days." It was 21 minutes past 11 by the clock over the elevator doors when Joel Cairo came in from the street. His forehead was bandaged. His clothes had the limp unfreshness of too many hours consecutive wear. His face was pasty, with sagging mouth and eyelids. Spade met him in front of the desk. "Good morning," Spade said easily. Cairo drew his tired body up straight and the drooping lines of his face tightened. "Good morning," he responded without enthusiasm. There was a pause. Spade said, "Let's go someplace where we can talk." Cairo raised his chin. "Please excuse me," he said. "Our conversations in private have not been such that I am anxious to continue them. Pardon my speaking bluntly, but it is the truth." "You mean last night?" Spade made an impatient gesture with head and hands. "What in hell else could I do? I thought you'd see that. If you pick a fight with her, or let her pick one with you, I've got to throw in with her. I don't know where that damned bird is." "You don't?" "She does. How in hell are we going to get it if I don't play along with her?" Cairo hesitated, said dubiously, "You have always, I must say, a smooth explanation." "Ready?" Spade scowled. "What do you want me to do? Learn to stutter? Well, we can talk over here." He led the way to the divan. When they were seated he asked, "Dundee take you down to the hall?" "Yes." "How long did they work on you?" "Until a very little while ago, and very much against my will." Pain and indignation were mixed in Cairo's face and voice. "I shall certainly take the matter up with the Consulate General of Greece and with an attorney. Go ahead, and see what it gets you." "What did you let the police shake out of you?" There was prim satisfaction in Cairo's smile. "Not a single thing. I adhered to the course you indicated earlier in your rooms." His smile went away. "Though I certainly wished you had devised a more reasonable story. I felt decidedly ridiculous repeating it." Spade grinned mockingly. "Sure," he said, "but its goofiness is what makes it good. You sure you didn't give them anything?" "You may rely upon it, Mr. Spade, I did not." Spade drummed with his fingers on the leather seat between them. "You'll be hearing from Dundee again. Stay dummied up on him and you'll be all right. Don't worry about the stories. Goofiness. A sensible one would have had us all in the cooler." He rose to his feet. "You'll want sleep if you've been standing up under a police storm all night." Seconds later, Effie Perrin was saying, "No, not yet," into the telephone when Spade entered his outer office. She looked around at him and her lips shaped a silent word, "Eva." He shook his head. "Yes, I'll have him call you as soon as he comes in, she said aloud and replaced the receiver on. It's Prong. That's the third time she's called up this morning, she told Spade. He made an impatient growling noise. The girl moved her brown eyes to indicate the inner office. Your Miss O'Shaughnessy's in. There. She's been waiting since a few minutes after 9. Spade nodded as if he had expected that and asked, what else? Sergeant Paul House called up. He didn't leave any message. Get him for me. And G called up. Spade's eyes brightened. He asked, who? Gee, that's what he said. Her air of personal indifference to the subject was flawless. When I told him you weren't in, he said, when he comes in, will you please tell him that G who? Got his message, phoned and will phone again. Spade worked his lips together as if tasting something he liked. Thanks, darling, he said. See if you can get Tom Paul House. He opened the inner door and went into his private office, pulling the door to behind him. Bridget O'Shaughnessy, dressed as on her first visit to the office, rose from a chair beside his desk and came quickly towards him. Somebody has been in my apartment, she exclaimed. It is all upside down, every which way. He seemed moderately surprised. Anything taken? I don't think so. I don't know. I was afraid to stay. I changed as fast as I could and came down here. Oh, you must have let that boy follow you there. Spade shook his head. No, Angel. He took an early copy of an afternoon paper from his pocket, opened it, and showed her a quarter-column headed screen routes burglar. A young woman named Caroline Bale, who lived alone in a Sutter Street apartment, had been awakened at 4 that morning by the sound of somebody moving in her bedroom. She had screamed. The mover had run away. 2 other women who lived alone in the same building had discovered, later in the morning, signs of the burglars having visited their apartments. Nothing had been taken from any of the 3. That's where I shook him, Spade explained. I went into that building and ducked out the back door. That's why all 3 were women who lived alone. He tried the apartments that had women's names in the vestibule register, hunting for you under an alias. But he was watching your place when we were there, she objected. Spade shrugged. There's no reason to think he's working alone. Or maybe he went to Sutter Street after he had begun to think you were going to stay all night in my place. There are a lot of maybes, but I didn't lead him to the coronet. She was not satisfied. But he found it, or somebody did. Sure. He frowned at her feet. I wonder if it could have been Cairo. He wasn't at his hotel all night, didn't get in till a few minutes ago. He told me he had been standing up under a police grilling all night. I wonder. He turned, opened the door, and asked Effie Perrin, caught Tom yet? He's not in. I'll try again in a few minutes. Thanks. Spade shut the door and faced Bridget O'Shaughnessy. She looked at him with cloudy eyes. You went to see Joe this morning, she asked. Yes. She hesitated. Why? Why? He smiled down at her. Because, my own true love, I've got to keep in some sort of touch with all the loose ends of this dizzy affair if I'm ever going to make heads or tails of it. He put an arm around her shoulders and led her over to his swivel chair. He kissed the tip of her nose lightly and set her down in the chair. He sat on the desk in front of her. Effie said, now, we've got to find a new home for you, haven't we? She nodded with emphasis. I won't go back there. He patted the desk beside his thighs and made a thoughtful face. I think I've got it, he said presently. Wait a minute. He went into the outer office, shutting the door. Effie Perrin reached for the telephone, saying, I'll try again. Afterwards. Does your woman's intuition still tell you that she's a Madonna or something? She looked sharply up at him. I still believe that no matter what kind of trouble she's gotten into, she's all right, if that's what you mean. That's what I mean, he said. Are you strong enough for her to give her a lift? How? Could you put her up for a few days? You mean at home? Yes. Her joints been broken into. That's the second burglary she's had this week. It'd be better for her if she wasn't alone. It would help a lot if you could take her in. Effie Perrin leaned forward, asking earnestly, is she really in danger, Sam? I think she is. She scratched her lip with a fingernail. That would scare Ma into a green hemorrhage. I'll have to tell her she's a surprise witness or something that you're keeping undercover till the last minute. You're a darling, Spade said. Better take her out there now. I'll get her key from her. And bring whatever she needs over from her apartment. Let's see. You ought Hunty to be seen leaving. Here together. You go home now. Take a taxi, but make sure you aren't followed. You probably won't be, but make sure. I'll send her out in a little while, making sure she isn't followed. 11 The fat man. The telephone bell was ringing when Spade returned to his office after sending Bridget O'Shaughnessy off to Effie Perrin's house. He went to the telephone. Hello, yes, this is Spade. Yes, I got it. I've been waiting to hear from you. Who, Mr. Gutman? Oh, yes, sure. Now the sooner the better. 12C right. Say 15 minutes. Right. Spade sat on the corner of his desk beside the telephone and rolled a cigarette. His mouth was a hard complacent V. His eyes, watching his fingers make the cigarette, smoldered over. Lower lids drawn up straight. The door opened and Eva Archer came in. Spade said, "Hello, honey," in a voice as lightly amiable as his face had suddenly become. "Oh, Sam, forgive me. Forgive me," she cried in a choked voice. She stood just inside the door, wadding a black-bordered handkerchief in her small gloved hands, peering into his face with frightened red and swollen eyes. He did not get up from his seat on the desk corner. He said, "Sure. That's all right. Forget it." "But, Sam," she wailed, "I sent those policemen there. I was mad, crazy with jealousy, and I phoned them that if they'd go there they'd learn something about Miles's murder." "What made you think that?" "Oh, I didn't. But I was mad, Sam, and I wanted to hurt you. It made things damned awkward." He put his arm around her and drew her nearer. "But it's all right now, only don't get any more crazy notions like that." "I won't," she promised, "ever. But you weren't nice to me last night. You were cold and distant and wanted to get rid of me, when I had come down there and waited so long to warn you, and you warned me about what? About Phil. He's found out about you being in Hove with me, and Miles had told him about my wanting a divorce, though of course he never knew what for, and now Phil thinks you killed his brother because he wouldn't give me the divorce so we could get married. He told me he believed that, and yesterday he went and told the police." "That's nice," Spade said softly. "And you came to warn me, and because I was busy you got up on your ear and helped this damned Phil Archer stir things up." "I'm sorry," she whimpered, "I know you won't forgive me." I am sorry, sorry. You ought to be," he agreed, "on your own account as well as mine. Has Dundee been to see you since Phil did his talking or anybody from the bureau?" "No." Alarm opened her eyes and mouth. "They will," he said, "and it'd be just as well to not let them find you here." "Did you tell them who you were when you phoned?" "Oh, no. I simply told them that if they'd go to your apartment right away they'd learn something about the murder and hung up." "Where'd you phone from?" "The drugstore up above your place." "Oh, Sam, dearest, He patted her shoulder and said pleasantly, "It was a dumb trick, all right, but it's done. Now you'd better run along home and think up things to tell the police. You'll be hearing from them. Maybe it'd be best to say no right across the board." He frowned at something distant. "Or maybe you'd better see Sid Wise first." He removed his arm from around her, took a card out of his pocket, scribbled 3 lines on its back, and gave it to her. "You can tell Sid everything." He frowned. "Or almost everything. Where were you the night Miles was shot?" "Home," she replied without hesitating. He shook his head, grinning at her. I was, she insisted. No, he said, but if that's your story it's alright with me. Go see Sid. It's up on the next corner, the pinkish building, room 827. Her blue eyes tried to probe his yellow-gray ones. What makes you think I wasn't home, she asked slowly. Nothing except that I know you weren't. But I was. Her lips twisted and anger darkened her eyes. Effie Perrin told you that, she said indignantly. I saw her hooking at my clothes and snooping around. You know she doesn't like me, Sam. Why do you believe things she tells you when you know she'd do anything to make trouble for me? Jesus, you women, Spade said mildly. He looked at the watch on his wrist. You'll have to trot along, precious. I'm late for an appointment now. You do what you want, but if I were you, I'd tell Sid the truth or nothing. I mean, leave out the parts you don't want to tell him, but don't make up anything to take its place. I'm not lying to you, Sam, she protested. Like hell you're not, he said and stood up. She strained on tiptoe to hold her face nearer his. You don't believe me, she whispered. I don't believe you. And you won't forgive me for what I did. Sure I do. He bent his head and kissed her mouth. That's all right. Now run along. She put her arms around him. Won't you go with me to see Mr. Wise? I can't, and I'd only be in the way. He patted her arms, took them from around his body, and kissed her left wrist between glove and sleeve. He put his hands on her shoulders, turned her to face the door, and released her with a little push. Beat it, he ordered. The mahogany door of Suite 12C at the Alexandria Hotel was opened by the boy Spade had talked to in the Belvedere lobby. Spade said, hello, good-naturedly. The boy did not say anything. He stood aside holding the door open. Spade went in. A fat man came to meet him. The fat man was flabbily fat with bulbous pink cheeks and lips and chins and neck, with a great soft egg of a belly that was all his torso, and pendant cones for arms and legs. As he advanced to meet Spade, all his bulbs rose and shook and fell separately with each step, in the manner of clustered soap bubbles not yet released from the pipe through which they had been blown. His eyes, made small by fat puffs around them, were dark and sleek. Dark ringlets thinly covered his broad scalp. He wore a black cutaway coat, black vest, black satin ascot tie holding a pinkish pearl, striped gray worsted trousers, and patent leather shoes. His voice was a throaty purr. Ah, Mr. Spade, he said with enthusiasm and held out a hand like a fat pink star. Spade took the hand and smiled and said, how do you do, Mr. Gutman? Holding Spade's hand, the fat man turned beside him, put his other hand to Spade's elbow, and guided him across a green rug to a green plush chair beside a table that held a siphon, some glasses, and a bottle of Johnny Walker whiskey on a tray, a box of cigars Coronas Del Ritz, 2 newspapers, and a small and plain yellow soapstone box. Spade sat in the green chair. The fat man began to fill 2 glasses from bottle and siphon. The boy had disappeared. Doors set in 3 of the room's walls were shut. The 4th wall, behind Spade, was pierced by 2 windows hooking out over Geary Street. We begin well, sir, the fat man purred, turning with a proffered glass in his hand. I distrust a man that says when if he's got to be careful not to drink too much it's because he's not to be trusted when he does. Spade took the glass and, smiling, made the beginning of a bow over it. The fat man raised his glass and held it against a window's light. He nodded approvingly at the bubbles running up in it. He said, well, sir, here's to plain speaking and clear understanding. They drank and lowered their glasses. The fat man looked shrewdly at Spade and asked, you're a close-mouthed man? Spade shook his head. I like to talk. Better and better. The fat man exclaimed. I distrust a close-mouthed man. He generally picks the wrong time to talk and says the wrong things. Talking's something you can't do judiciously unless you keep in practice. He beamed over his glass. We'll get along, sir, that we will. He set his glass on the table and held the box of Coronas del Ritz out to Spade. "A cigar, sir." Spade took a cigar, trimmed the end of it, and lighted it. Meanwhile the fat man pulled another green plush chair around to face Spade's within convenient distance and placed a smoking stand within reach of both chairs. Then he took his glass from the table, took a cigar from the box, and lowered himself into his chair. His bulb stopped jouncing and settled into flabby rest. He sighed comfortably and said, "Now, sir, we'll talk if you like. And I'll tell you, right out that I'm a man who likes talking to a man that likes to talk." "Swell. Will we talk about the black bird?" The fat man laughed and his bulbs rode up and down on his laughter. "Will we?" he asked, and, "We will," he replied. His pink face was shiny with delight. "You're the man for me, sir, a man cut along my own lines. No beating about the bush, but right to the point. Will we talk about the blackbird?" "We will. I hike that, sir. I hike that way of doing business. Let us talk about the blackbird by all means, but first, sir, answer me a question, please, though maybe it's an unnecessary one, so we'll understand each other from the beginning. You're here as Miss O'Shaughnessy's representative." Spade blew smoke above the fat man's head in a long slanting plume. He frowned thoughtfully at the ash-tipped end of his cigar. He replied deliberately, "I can't say yes or no. There's nothing certain about it either way, yet." He looked up at the fat man and stopped, frowning. "It depends. It depends on." Spade shook his head. "If I knew what it depends on I could say yes or no." The fat man took a mouthful from his glass, swallowed it, and suggested, "Maybe it depends on Joel Cairo." Spade's prompt maybe was non-committal. He drank. The fat man leaned forward until his belly stopped him. His smile was ingratiating and so was his purring voice. "You could say, then, that the question is which one of them you'll represent. You could put it that way. It will be one or the other." "I didn't say that." The fat man's eyes glistened. His voice sank to a throaty whisper asking, "Who else is there?" Spade pointed his cigar at his own chest. "There's me," he said. The fat man sank back in his chair and let his body go flaccid. He blew his breath out in a long contented gust. "That's wonderful, sir," he purred. "That's wonderful. I do like a man that tells you right out he's looking out for himself. Don't we all? I don't trust a man that says he's not. And the man that's telling the truth when he says he's not I distrust most of all, because he's an ass, and an ass that's going contrary to the laws of nature." Spade exhaled smoke. His face was politely attentive. He said, "Uh-huh. Now let's talk about the blackbird." The fat man smiled benevolently. "Let's," he said. He squinted so that fat puffs crowding together left nothing of his eyes but a dark gleam visible. "Mr. Spade, have you any conception of how much money can be made out of that blackbird?" "No." The fat man leaned forward again and put a bloated pink hand on the arm of Spade's chair. "Well, sir, if I told you, by gad, if I told you have, you'd call me a liar." Spade smiled. "No," he said, "not even if I thought it. But if you won't take the risk, just tell me what it is and I'll figure out the profits." The fat man laughed. "You couldn't do it, sir. Nobody could do it that hadn't had a world of experience with things of that sort," and he paused impressively. "There aren't any other things of that sort." His bulbs jostled one another as he laughed again. He stopped laughing, abruptly. His fleshy lips hung open as laughter had left them. He stared at Spade with an intentness that suggested myopia. He asked, "You mean you don't know what it is?" Amazement took the throatiness out of his voice. Spade made a careless gesture with his cigar. "Oh, hell," he said lightly, "I know what it's supposed to look like. I know the value in life you people put on it. I don't know what it is." "She didn't tell you, Miss O'Shaughnessy?" "Yes. A lovely girl, sir." "Uh-huh. No. The fat man's eyes were dark gleams in ambush behind pink puffs of flesh. He said indistinctly, "She must know," and then, "And Cairo didn't either. Cairo is cagey. He's willing to buy it, but he won't risk telling me anything I don't know." Already. The fat man moistened his lips with his tongue. "How much is he willing to buy it for?" he asked. $10,000. The fat man laughed scornfully. 10,000, and dollars, mind you, not even pounds. That's the Greek for you. Humph. And what did you say to that? I said if I turned it over to him I'd expect the 10,000. Ah, yes, if. Nicely put, sir. The fat man's forehead squirmed in a flesh-blurred frown. They must know, he said only partly aloud, then, do they know what the bird is, sir? What was your impression? I can't help you there, Spade confessed. There's not much to go by. Cairo didn't say he did and he didn't say he didn't. She said she didn't, but I took it for granted that she was lying. That was not an injudicious thing to do, the fat man said, but his mind was obviously not on his words. He scratched his head. He frowned until his forehead was marked by raw red creases. He fidgeted in his chair as much as his size and the size of the chair permitted fidgeting. He shut his eyes, opened them suddenly wide and said to Spade, "Maybe they don't." His bulbous pink face slowly lost its worried frown and then, more quickly, took on an expression of ineffable happiness. "If they don't," he cried, and again, "if they don't, I'm the only one in the whole wide sweet world who does." Spade drew his lips back in a tight smile. "I'm glad I came to the right place," he said. The fat man smiled too, but somewhat vaguely. Happiness had gone out of his face, though he continued to smile, and caution had come into his eyes. His face was a watchful-eyed, smiling mask held up between his thoughts and Spade. His eyes, avoiding Spade's, shifted to the glass at Spade's elbow. His face brightened. "By gad, sir," he said, "your glass is empty." He got up and went to the table and clattered glasses and siphon and bottle, mixing 2 drinks. Spade was immobile in his chair until the fat man, with a flourish and a bow and a jocular, "Ah, sir, this kind of medicine will never hurt you," had handed him his refilled glass. Then Spade rose and stood close to the fat man, looking down at him, and Spade's eyes were hard and bright. He raised his glass. His voice was deliberate, challenging, here's to plain speaking and clear understanding. The fat man chuckled and they drank. The fat man sat down. He held his glass against his belly with both hands and smiled up at Spade. He said, "Well, sir, it's surprising, but it well may be a fact that neither of them does know exactly what that bird is, and that nobody in all this whole wide sweet world knows what it is, saving and excepting only your humble servant, Caspar Goodman, Esquire." Swell. Spade stood with legs apart, one hand in his trousers pocket, the other holding his glass. "When you've told me there'll only be 2 of us who know." "Mathematically correct, sir." The fat man's eyes twinkled but his smile spread. "I don't know for certain that I'm going to tell you." "Don't be a damned fool," Spade said patiently. "You know what it is. I know where it is. That's why we're here." "Well, sir, where is it?" Spade ignored the question. The fat man bunched his lips, raised his eyebrows, and cocked his head a little to the left. "You see," he said blandly, "I must tell you what I know, but you will not tell me what you know. That is hardly equitable, sir. No, no, I do not think we can do business along those lines." Spade's face became pale and hard. He spoke rapidly in a low furious voice, "Think again. And think fast. I told that punk of yours that you'd have to talk to me before you got through. I'll tell you now that you'll do your talking today or you are through. What are you wasting my time for, you and your lousy secret? Christ. I know exactly what that stuff is that they keep in the sub-treasury vaults, but what good does that do me? I can get along without you. God damn you. Maybe you could have got along without me if you'd kept clear of me. You can't now. Not in San Francisco. You'll come in or you'll get out, and you'll do it today." He turned and with angry heedlessness tossed his glass at the table. The glass struck the wood, burst apart, and splashed its contents and glittering fragments over table and floor. Spade, deaf and blind to the crash, wheeled to confront the fat man again. The fat man paid no more attention to the glass's fate than Spade did. Lips pursed, eyebrows raised, head cocked a little to the left, he had maintained his pink-faced blandness throughout Spade's angry speech, and he maintained it now. Spade, still furious, said, "And another thing. I don't want." The door to Spade's left opened. The boy who had admitted Spade came in. He shut the door, stood in front of it with his hands flat against his flanks, and looked at Spade. The boy's eyes were wide open and dark with wide pupils. Their gaze ran over Spade's body from shoulders to knees, and up again to settle on the handkerchief whose maroon border peeped from the breast pocket of Spade's brown coat. "Another thing," Spade repeated, glaring at the boy, "keep that gunsel away from me. While you're making up your mind. I'll kill him. I don't like him. He makes me nervous. I'll kill him the first time he gets in my way. I won't give him an even break. I won't give him a chance. I'll kill him." The boy's lips twitched in a shadowy smile. He neither raised his eyes nor spoke. The fat man said tolerantly, "Well, sir, I must say you have a most violent temper." Temper? Spade laughed crazily. He crossed to the chair on which he had dropped his hat, picked up the hat, and set it on his head. He held out a long arm that ended in a thick forefinger pointing at the fat man's belly. His angry voice filled the room. "Think it over and think like hell. You've got till 5:30 to do it in. Then you're either in or out, for keeps." He let his arm drop, scowled at the bland fat man for a moment, scowled at the boy, and went to the door through which he had entered. When he opened the door he turned and said harshly, 5:30 then the curtain." The boy, staring at Spade's chest, repeated the two words he had twice spoken in the Belvedere lobby. His voice was not loud. It was bitter. Spade went out and slammed the door. 12 merry-go-round. Spade rode down from Gutman's floor in an elevator. His lips were dry and rough in a face otherwise pale and damp. When he took out his handkerchief to wipe his face he saw his hand trembling. He grinned at it and said, "Will you up?" so loudly that the elevator operator turned his head over his shoulder and asked, "Sir?" Spade walked down Geary Street to the Palace Hotel, where he ate luncheon. His face had lost its pallor, his lips their dryness, and his hand its trembling by the time he had sat down. He ate hungrily without haste, and then went to Sid Wise's office. When Spade entered, Wise was biting a fingernail and staring at the window. He took his hand from his mouth, screwed his chair around to face Spade, and said, "Lo. Push a chair up." Spade moved a chair to the side of the big paper-laden desk and sat down. "Mrs. Archer. Come in?" he asked. "Yes." The faintest of lights flickered in Wise's eyes. "Going to marry the lady, Sammy?" Spade sighed irritably through his nose. "Christ, now you start that," he grumbled. A brief tired smile lifted the corners of the lawyer's mouth. "If you don't," he said, "you're going to have a job on your hands." Spade looked up from the cigarette he was making and spoke sourly, "You mean you are well, that's what you're for. What did she tell you? About you? About anything I ought to know?" Wise ran fingers through his hair, sprinkling dandruff down on his shoulders. "She told me she had tried to get a divorce from Miles so she could." "I know all that," Spade interrupted him. "You can skip it. Get to the part I don't know." "How do I know how much she?" "Quit stalling, Sid." Spade held the flame of his lighter to the end of his cigarette. "What did she tell you that she wanted kept from me?" Wise looked reprovingly at Spade. "Now, Sammy," he began, "that's not." Spade looked heavenward at the ceiling and groaned, "Dear God, he's my own lawyer. That's got rich off me and I have to get down on my knees and beg him to tell me things." He lowered at Wise. "What in hell do you think I sent her to you for?" Wise made a weary grimace. Just one more client like you, he complained, and I'd be in a sanitarium or San Quentin. You'd be with most of your clients. Did she tell you where she was the night he was killed? Yes. Where? Following him. Spade sat up straight and blinked. He exclaimed incredulously, Jesus, these women. Then he laughed, relaxed, and asked, well, what did she see? Wise shook his head. Nothing much. When he came home for dinner that evening he told her he had a date with a girl at the St. Mark, ragging her, telling her that was her chance to get the divorce she wanted. She thought at first he was just trying to get under her skin. He knew. I know the family history, Spade said. Skip it. Tell me what she did. I will if you'll give me a chance. After he had gone out she began to think that maybe he might have had that date. You know Miles. It would have been like him too. You can skip Miles's character too. I ought Hunty to tell you a damned thing, the lawyer said. So she got their car from the garage and drove down to the St. Mark, sitting in the car across the street. She saw him come out of the hotel and she saw that he was shadowing a man and a girl. She says she saw the same girl with you last night who had come out just ahead of him. She knew then that he was working, had been kidding her. I suppose she was disappointed, and mad. She sounded that way when she told me about it. She followed Miles long enough to make sure he was shadowing the pair, and then she went up to your apartment. You weren't home. What time was that? Spade asked. When she got to your place between 9:30 and 10 the first time. The first time? Yes. She drove around for half an hour or so and then tried again. That would make it, say, 10:30. You were still out, so she drove back downtown and went to a movie to kill time. Until after midnight, when she thought she'd be more likely to find you in. Spade frowned. She went to a movie at 10:30. So she says the one on Powell Street that stays open till 1 in the morning. She didn't want to go home, she said, because she didn't want to be there when Miles came. That always made him mad, it seems, especially if it was around midnight. She stayed in the movie till it closed. Wise's words came out slower now and there was a sardonic glint in his eye. She says she had decided by then not to go back to your place again. She says she didn't know whether you'd like having her drop in that late. So she went to Tate's, the one on Ellis Street, had something to eat and then went home alone. Wise rocked back in his chair and waited for Spade to speak. Spade's face was expressionless. He asked, you believe her? Don't you? Wise replied. How do I know? How do I know it isn't something you fixed up between you to tell me? Wise smiled. You don't cash many checks for strangers, do you, Sammy? Not basketfuls. Well, what then? Miles wasn't home. It was at least 2 o'clock by then. Must be even and he was dead. Miles wasn't home, Wise said. That seems to have made her mad again, his not being home first to be made mad by her not being home. So she took the car out of the garage again and went back to your place. And I wasn't home. I was down looking at Miles's corpse. Jesus, what a swell lot of merry-go-round riding. Then what? She went home, and her husband still wasn't there, and while she was undressing your messenger came with the news of his death. Spade didn't speak until he had with great care rolled and lighted another cigarette. Then he said, I think that's an all right spread. It seems to click with most of the known facts. It ought to hold. Wise's fingers, running through his hair again, combed more dandruff down on his shoulders. He studied Spade's face with curious eyes and asked, but you don't believe it? Spade plucked his cigarette from between his lips. I don't believe it or disbelieve it, Sid. I don't know a damn thing about it. A wry smile twisted the lawyer's mouth. He moved his shoulders wearily and said, that's right, I am selling you out. Why don't you get an honest lawyer, one you can trust? That fellow's dead. Spade stood up. He sneered at Wise. Getting touchy? I haven't got enough to think about, now I've got to remember to be polite to you. What did I do forget to genuflect when I came in? Sid Wise smiled sheepishly. You're a son of a gun, Sammy, he said. Effie Perrin was standing in the center of Spade's outer office when he entered. She looked at him with worried brown eyes and asked, "What happened?" Spade's face grew stiff. "What happened where?" he demanded. "Why didn't she come?" Spade took 2 long steps and caught Effie Perrin by the shoulders. "She didn't get there," he bawled into her frightened face. She shook her head violently from side to side. "I waited and she didn't come, and I couldn't get you on the phone, so I came down." Spade jerked his hands away from her shoulders, thrust them far down in his trousers pockets, said, "Another merry-go-round," in a loud enraged voice, and strode into his private office. He came out again. "Phone your mother," he commanded. "See if she's come yet." He walked up and down the office while the girl used the telephone. "No," she said when she had finished. Did you send her out in a taxi?" His grunt probably meant yes. "Are you sure somebody must have followed her?" Spade stopped pacing the floor. He put his hands on his hips and glared at the girl. He addressed her in a loud savage voice, "Nobody followed her. Do you think I'm a goddamned schoolboy? I made sure of it before I put her in the cab. I rode a dozen blocks with her to be more sure, and I checked her another half-dozen blocks after I got out." "Well, but she didn't get there. You've told me that." "I believe it. Do you think I think she did get there?" Effie Perrin sniffed. "You certainly act like a goddamn schoolboy," she said. Spade made a harsh noise in his throat and went to the corridor door. "I'm going out and find her if I have to dig up sewers," he said. "Stay here till I'm back or you hear from me. For Christ's sake, let's do something right." He went out, walked half the distance to the elevators, and retraced his steps. Effie Perrin was sitting at her desk when he opened the door. He said, "You ought to know better than to pay any attention to me when I talk like that." "If you think I pay any attention to you, you're crazy," she replied, only she crossed her arms and felt her shoulders, and her mouth twitched uncertainly. "I won't be able to wear an evening gown for 2 weeks, you big brute." He grinned humbly, said, "I'm no damned good, darling," made an exaggerated bow, and went out again. 2 yellow taxicabs were at the corner stand to which Spade went. Their chauffeurs were standing together talking. Spade asked, "Where's the red-faced blonde driver that was here at noon?" "Got a load," one of the chauffeurs said. "Will he be back here?" "I guess so." The other chauffeur ducked his head to the east. "Here he comes now." Spade walked down to the corner and stood by the curb until the red-faced blonde chauffeur had parked his cab and got out. Then Spade went up to him and said, "I got into your cab with a lady at noontime. We went out Stockton Street and up Sacramento to Jones, where I got out." "Sure," the red-faced man said, "I remember that. I told you to take her to a 9th Avenue number. You didn't take her there. Where did you take her?" The chauffeur rubbed his cheek with a grimy hand and looked doubtfully at Spade. "I don't know about this." "It's all right," Spade assured him, giving him one of his cards. "If you want to play safe, though, we can ride up to your office and get your superintendent's okay." "I guess it's all right. I took her to the ferry building. By herself." "Yeah. Sure. Didn't take her anywhere else first?" "No. It was like this, after we dropped you I went on out Sacramento, and when we got to Polk she rapped on the glass and said she wanted to get a newspaper, so I stopped at the corner and whistled for a kid, and she got her paper." "Which paper?" "The Call. Then I went on out Sacramento some more, and just after we'd crossed Van Ness she knocked on the glass again and said take her to the ferry building." "Was she excited or anything?" "Not so's I noticed. And when you got to the ferry building, she paid me off, and that was all. Anybody waiting for her there?" "I didn't see them if they was." "Which way did she go?" "At the ferry I don't know. Maybe upstairs, or towards the stairs." "Take the newspaper with her." Yeah, she had it tucked under her arm when she paid me. With the pink sheet outside, or one of the white. Hell, Cap, I don't remember that. Spade thanked the chauffeur, said, "Get yourself a smoke," and gave him a silver dollar. Spade bought a copy of the call and carried it into an office building vestibule to examine it out of the wind. His eyes ran swiftly over the front page headlines and over those on the second and third pages. They paused for a moment under "Suspect arrested as counterfeiter" on the fourth page, and again on page 5 under "Bay Youth seeks death with bullet." Pages 6 and 7 held nothing to interest him. On 8, 3 boys arrested as SF burglars after shooting held his attention for a moment, and after that nothing until he reached the 35th page, which held news of the weather, shipping, produce, finance, divorce, births, marriages, and deaths. He read the list of dead, passed over pages 36 and 37. Financial news found nothing to stop his eyes on the 38th and last page, sighed, folded the newspaper, put it in his coat pocket, and rolled a cigarette. For 5 minutes he stood there in the office building vestibule smoking and staring sulkily at nothing. Then he walked up to Stockton Street, hailed a taxicab, and had himself driven to the coronet. He let himself into the building and into Bridget O'Shaughnessy's apartment with the key she had given him. The blue gown she had worn the previous night was hanging across the foot of her bed. Her blue stockings and slippers were on the bedroom floor. The police room box that had held jewelry in her dressing table drawer now stood empty on the dressing table top. Spade frowned at it, ran his tongue across his lips, strolled through the rooms, looking around but not touching anything, then left the coronet and went downtown again. In the doorway of Spade's office building he came face to face with the boy he had left at Gutman's. The boy put himself in Spade's path, blocking the entrance, and said, "Come on. He wants to see you." The boy's hands were in his overcoat pockets. His pockets bulged more than his hands. Need have made them bulge. Spade grinned and said mockingly, "I didn't expect you till 5:25. I hope I haven't kept you waiting." The boy raised his eyes to Spade's mouth and spoke in the strained voice of one in physical pain, "Keep on riding me and you're going to be picking iron out of your navel." Spade chuckled. "The cheaper the crook, the gaudier the patter," he said cheerfully. "Well, let's go." They walked up Sutter Street side by side. The boy kept his hands in his overcoat pockets. They walked a little more than a block in silence. Then Spade asked pleasantly, "How long have you been off the gooseberry lay, son?" The boy did not show that he had heard the question. "Did you ever?" Spade began, and stopped. A soft light began to glow in his yellowish eyes. He did not address the boy again. They went into the Alexandria, rode up to the 12th floor, and walked down the corridor towards Gutman's suite. Nobody else was in the corridor. Spade lagged a little, so that, when they were within 15 feet of Gutman's door, he was perhaps a foot and a half behind the boy. He leaned sidewise suddenly and grasped the boy from behind by both arms, just beneath the boy's elbows. He forced the boy's arms forward so that the boy's hands, in his overcoat pockets, lifted the overcoat up before him. The boy struggled and squirmed, but he was impotent in the big man's grip. The boy kicked back, but his feet went between Spade's spread legs. Spade lifted the boy straight up from the floor and brought him down hard on his feet. Again. The impact made little noise on the thick carpet. At the moment of impact Spade's hands slid down and got a fresh grip on the boy's wrists. The boy, teeth set hard together, did not stop straining against the man's big hands, but he could not tear himself loose, could not keep the man's hands from crawling down over his own hands. The boy's teeth ground together audibly, making a noise that mingled with the noise of Spade's breathing as Spade crushed the boy's hands. They were tense and motionless for a long moment. Then the boy's arms became limp. Spade released the boy and stepped back. In each of Spade's hands, when they came out of the boy's overcoat pockets, there was a heavy automatic pistol. The boy turned and faced Spade. The boy's face was a ghastly white blank. He kept his hands in his overcoat pockets. He looked at Spade's chest and did not say anything. Spade put the pistols in his own pockets and grinned derisively. "Come on," he said. "This will put you in solid with your boss." They went to Gutman's door and Spade knocked. 13 The Emperor's Gift. Gutman opened the door. A glad smile lighted his fat face. He held out a hand and said, "Ah, come in, sir. Thank you for coming. Come in." Spade shook the hand and entered. The boy went in behind him. The fat man shut the door. Spade took the boy's pistols from his pockets and held them out to Gutman. "Here. You shouldn't let him run around with these. He'll get himself hurt." The fat man laughed merrily and took the pistols. Well, he said, "what's this?" He looked from Spade to the boy. Spade said, "A crippled nosy took them away from him, but I made him give them back." The white-faced boy took the pistols out of Gutman's hands and pocketed them. The boy did not speak. Gutman laughed again. "By gad, sir," he told Spade, "you're a chap worth knowing, an amazing character. Come in. Sit down. Give me your hat." The boy left the room by the door to the right of the entrance. The fat man installed Spade in a green plush chair by the table, pressed a cigar upon him, held a light to it, mixed whiskey and carbonated water, put one glass in Spade's hand, and, holding the other, sat down facing Spade. "Now, sir," he said, "I hope you'll let me apologize for." "Never mind that," Spade said. "Let's talk about the black bird." The fat man cocked his head to the left and regarded Spade with fond eyes. "All right, sir," he agreed. "Let's." He took a sip from the glass in his hand. "This is going to be the most astounding thing you've ever heard of, sir, and I say that knowing that a man of your caliber in your profession must have known some astounding things in his time." Spade nodded politely. The fat man screwed up his eaves and asked, "What do you know, sir, about the Order of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem, later called the Knights of Rhodes, and other things?" Spade waved his cigar. "Not much, only what I remember from history in school, crusaders or something." "Very good. Now you don't remember that Suleiman the Magnificent chased them out of Rhodes in 1523? "No." "Well, sir, he did, and they settled in Crete. And they stayed there for 7 years, until R530, when they persuaded the Emperor Charles V to give them." Gutman held up 3 puffy fingers and counted them: Malta, Gozo, and Tripoli. Yes, sir, but with these conditions, they were to pay the Emperor each year the tribute of 1. He held up a finger: Falcon, in acknowledgement that Malta was still under Spain, and if they ever left the island it was to revert to Spain. Understand, he was giving it to them, but not unless they used it, and they couldn't give or sell it to anybody else. Yes. The fat man looked over his shoulders at the 3 closed doors, hunched his chair a few inches nearer Spade's, and reduced his voice to a husky whisper. "Have you any conception of the extreme, the immeasurable, wealth of the order at that time?" "If I remember," Spade said, "they were pretty well fixed." Gutman smiled indulgently. "Pretty well, sir, is putting it mildly." His whisper became lower and more purring. "They were rolling in wealth, sir. You've no idea. None of us has any idea. For years they had preyed on the Saracens, had taken nobody knows what spoils of gems, precious metals, silks, ivories, the cream of the East. That is history, sir. We all know that the holy wars to them, as to the Templars, were largely a matter of loot. Well, now, the Emperor Charles has given them Malta, and all the rent he asks is 1 insignificant bird per annum, just as a matter of form. What could be more natural than for these immeasurably wealthy knights to look around for some way of expressing their gratitude? Well, sir, that's exactly what they did, and they hit on the happy thought of sending Charles for the first year's tribute, not an insignificant live bird, but a glorious golden falcon encrusted from head to foot with the finest jewels in their coffers. And remember, sir, they had fine ones, the finest out of Asia. Gutman stopped whispering. His sleek dark eyes examined Spade's face, which was placid. The fat man asked, "Well, sir, what do you think of that?" "I don't know." The fat man smiled complacently. "These are facts, historical facts, not schoolbook history, not Mr. Wells's history, but history nevertheless." He leaned forward. "The archives of the order from the 12th century on are still at Malta. They are not intact, but what is there holds no less than 3." He held up 3 fingers, references that can't be to anything else but this jeweled falcon. In J. Delaville L. E. Roulx's Les Archives de l'Ordre de Saint-Jean there is a reference to it, oblique to be sure, but a reference still. And the unpublished because unfinished. At the time of his death supplement to Paulis del Origine ed Instituto del Sacro Milita Ordine has a clear and unmistakable statement of the facts I am telling you. "All right," Spade said. "All right, sir." Grand Master Villers de l'Isle d'Adam had this foot-high jeweled bird made by Turkish slaves in the castle of Saint Angelo and sent it to Charles, who was in Spain. He sent it in a galley commanded by a French knight named Cormier or Corvera, a member of the order. His voice dropped to a whisper again. "It never reached Spain." He smiled with compressed lips and asked, "You know of Barbarossa, Redbeard, Kheyr ed-Din Noah, famous admiral of buccaneers sailing out of Algiers then?" "Well, sir, he took the knight's galley and he took the bird. The bird went to Algiers." "That's a fact." "That's a fact that the French historian Pierre Dan put in one of his letters from Algiers. He wrote that the bird had been there for more than 100 years, until it was carried away by Sir Francis Verney, the English adventurer who was with the Algerian buccaneers for a while. Maybe it wasn't, but Pierre Dan believed it was, and that's good enough for me. There's nothing said about the bird in Lady Frances Verney's Memoirs of the Verney family during the 17th century, to be sure. I looked. And it's pretty certain that Sir Francis didn't have the bird when he died in a Messina hospital in 1615. He was stony broke. But, sir, there's no denying that the bird did go to Sicily. It was there and it came into the possession there of Victor Amadeus II sometime after he became king in 1713, and it was one of his gifts to his wife when he married in Chambéry after abdicating. That is a fact, sir. Carutti, the author of Storia del Regno di Vittorio Amadeo II, himself vouched for it. Maybe the Amadeo and his wife took it along with them to Turin when he tried to revoke his abdication. Be that as it may, it turned up next in the possession of a Spaniard who had been with the army that took Naples in 1734, the father of Don José Monino y Redondo, Count of Floridablanca, who was Charles II's chief minister. There's nothing to show that it didn't stay in that family until at least the end of the Carlist War in 40. Then it appeared in Paris. At just about the time that Paris was full of Carlists who had had to get out of Spain. One of them must have brought it with him, but, whoever he was, it's likely he knew nothing about its real value. It had been no doubt as a precaution during the Carlist trouble in Spain, painted or enameled over to look like nothing more than a fairly interesting black statuette. And in that disguise, sir, it was, you might say, kicked around Paris for 70 years by private owners and dealers too stupid to see what it was under the skin. The fat man paused to smile and shake his head regretfully. Then he went on, for 70 years, sir, this marvelous item was, as you might say, a football in the gutters of Paris until 1911, when a Greek dealer named Charilaos Constantinides found it in an obscure shop. It didn't take Charilaos long to learn what it was and to acquire it. No thickness of enamel could conceal value from his eyes and nose. Well, sir, Charilaos was the man who traced most of its history and who identified it as what it actually was. I got wind of it and finally forced most of the history out of him, though I've been able to add a few details since. Charilaos was in no hurry to convert his find into money at once. He knew that, enormous as its intrinsic value was, a far higher, a terrific, price could be obtained for it once its authenticity was established beyond doubt. possibly he planned to do business with one of the modern descendants of the old order, the English Order of St. John of Jerusalem, the Prussian Johanniterorden, or the Italian or German Longuis of the Sovereign Order of Malta, all wealthy orders. The fat man raised his glass, smiled at its emptiness, and rose to fill it and Spade's. "You begin to believe me a little?" he asked as he worked the siphon. "I haven't said I didn't." "No," Gutman chuckled. "But how you looked." He sat down, drank generously, and patted his mouth with a white handkerchief. "Well, sir, to hold it safe while pursuing his researches into its history, Shari Laus had re-enameled the bird, apparently just as it is now. 1 year to the very day after he had acquired it. That was possibly 3 months after I'd made him confess to me. I picked up the Times in London and read that his establishment had been burglarized and him murdered. I was in Paris the next day." He shook his head sadly. "The bird was gone. By gad, sir, I was wild. I didn't believe anybody else knew what it was. I didn't believe he had told anybody but me. A great quantity of stuff had been stolen. That made me think that the thief had simply taken the bird along with the rest of his plunder, not knowing what it was. Because I assure you that a thief who knew its value would not burden himself with anything else. No, sir, at least not anything less than crown jewels." He shut his eyes and smiled complacently at an inner thought. He opened his eyes and said, "That was 17 years ago. Well, sir, it took me 17 years to locate that bird, but I did it. I wanted it, and I'm not a man that's easily discouraged when he wants something." His smile grew broad. "I wanted it and I found it. I want it and I'm going to have it." He drained his glass, dried his lips again, and returned his handkerchief to his pocket. "I traced it to the home of a Russian general, one Chemidov in a Constantinople suburb. He didn't know a thing about it. It was nothing but a black enameled figure to him, but his natural contrariness, the natural contrariness of a Russian general, kept him from selling it to me when I made him an offer. Perhaps in my eagerness I was a little unskillful, though not very. I don't know about that. But I did know I wanted it, and I was afraid the stupid soldier might begin to investigate his property, might chip off some of the enamel. So I sent some agents to get it. Well, sir, they got it and I haven't got it." He stood up and carried his empty glass to the table. "But I'm going to get it." "Your glass, sir? Then the bird doesn't belong to any of you?" Spade asked, "but to a General Chemidov." "Belong?" the fat man said jovially. "Well, sir, you might say it belonged to the King of Spain, but I don't see how you can honestly grant anybody else clear title to it except by right of possession." He clucked. "An article of that value that has passed from hand to hand by such means is clearly the property of whoever can get hold of it. Then it's Miss O'Shaughnessy's now?" "No, sir, except as my agent," Spade said. "Oh, ironically." Gutman, looking thoughtfully at the stopper of the whiskey bottle in his hand, asked, "There's no doubt that she's got it now?" "Not much." "Where?" "I don't know exactly." The fat man set the bottle on the table with a bang. "But you said you did," he protested. Spade made a careless gesture with one hand. "I meant to say I know where to get it when the time comes." The pink bulbs of Gutman's face arranged themselves more happily. "And you do?" he asked. "Yes." "Where?" Spade grinned and said, "Leave that to me. That's my end." "When?" "When I'm ready." The fat man pursed his lips and, smiling with only slight uneasiness, asked, "Mr. Spade, where is Miss O'Shaughnessy now?" "In my hands, safely tucked away." Gutman smiled with approval. "Trust you for that, sir," he said. "Well now, sir, before we sit down to talk prices, answer me this: how soon can you, or how soon are you willing to produce the Falcon?" "A couple of days." The fat man nodded. "That is satisfactory. But I forgot our nourishment." He turned to the table, poured whiskey, squirted charged water into it, set a glass at Spade's elbow and held his own aloft. "Well, sir, here's to a fair bargain and profits large enough for both of us." They drank. The fat man sat down. Spade asked, "What's your idea of a fair bargain?" Gutman held his glass up to the light, looked affectionately at it, took another long drink, and said, "I have two proposals to make, sir, and either is fair. Take your choice. I will give you $25,000 when you deliver the Falcon to me, and another $25,000 as soon as I get to New York, or I will give you 1/4 25% of what I realize on the Falcon. There you are, sir, an almost immediate $50,000 or a vastly greater sum within, say, a couple of months." Spade drank and asked, "How much greater?" "Vastly," the fat man repeated. "Who knows how much greater? Shall I say 100,000, or 250,000? Will you believe me if I name the sum that seems the probable minimum?" "Why not?" The fat man smacked his lips and lowered his voice to a purring murmur. "What would you say, sir, to 500,000? Spade narrowed his eyes. "Then you think the dingus is worth 2 million, Gutman smiled serenely. "In your own words, why not?" he asked. Spade emptied his glass and set it on the table. He put his cigar in his mouth, took it out, looked at it, and put it back in. His yellow-gray eyes were faintly muddy. He said, "That's a hell of a lot of dough." The fat man agreed, "That's a hell of a lot of dough." He leaned forward and patted Spade's knee. "That is the absolute rock-bottom minimum, or Shari Laus Constantin Ides was a blithering idiot and he wasn't." Spade removed the cigar from his mouth again, frowned at it with distaste, and put it on the smoking stand. He shut his eyes hard, opened them again. Their muddiness had thickened. He said, the minimum, and the maximum, an unmistakable sh followed the x in maximum as he said it. The maximum. Gutman held his empty hand out, palm up. "I refuse to guess. You'd think me crazy. I don't know. There's no telling how high it could go, sir, and that's the one and only truth about it." Spade pulled his sagging lower lip tight against the upper. He shook his head impatiently. A sharp frightened gleam awoke in his eyes and was smothered by the deepening muddiness. He stood up, helping himself up with his hands on the arms of his chair. He shook his head again, and took an uncertain step forward. He laughed thickly and muttered, "God damn you." Gutman jumped up and pushed his chair back. His fat globes jiggled. His eaves were dark holes in an oily pink face. Spade swung his head from side to side until his dull eyes were pointed at, if not focused, on the door. He took another uncertain step. The fat man called sharply, "Wilmer." A door opened and the boy came in. Spade took a third step. His face was gray now, with jaw muscles standing out like tumors under his ears. His legs did not straighten again after his fourth step, and his muddy eyes were almost covered by their lids. He took his fifth step. The boy walked over and stood close to Spade, a little in front of him, but not directly between Spade and the door. The boy's right hand was inside his coat over his heart. The corners of his mouth twitched. Spade essayed his sixth step. The boy's leg darted out across Spade's leg, in front. Spade tripped over the interfering leg and crashed face down on the floor. The boy, keeping his right hand under his coat, looked down at Spade. Spade tried to get up. The boy drew his right foot far back and kicked Spade's temple. The kick rolled Spade over on his side. Once more he tried to get up, could not, and went to sleep. 14 La Paloma. Spade, coming around the corner from the elevator at a few minutes past 6 in the morning, saw yellow light glowing through the frosted glass of his office door. He halted abruptly, set his lips together, looked up and down the corridor, and advanced to the door with swift, quiet strides. He put his hand on the knob and turned it with care that permitted neither rattle nor click. He turned the knob until it would turn no farther. The door was locked. Holding the knob still, he changed hands, taking it now in his left hand. With his right hand he brought his keys out of his pocket, carefully, so they could not jingle against one another. He separated the office key from the others and, smothering the others together in his palm, inserted the office key in the lock. The insertion was soundless. He balanced himself on the balls of his feet, filled his lungs, clicked the door open, and went in. Effie Perrin sat sleeping with her head on her forearms on her desk. She wore her coat and had one of Spade's overcoats wrapped cape fashion around her. Spade blew his breath out in a muffled laugh, shut the door behind him, and crossed to the inner door. The inner office was empty. He went over to the girl and put a hand on her shoulder. She stirred, raised her head drowsily, and her eyelids fluttered. Suddenly she sat up straight, opening her eyes wide. She saw Spade, smiled, leaned back in her chair, and rubbed her eyes with her fingers. "So you finally got back," she said. "What time is it?" 6 o'clock. "What are you doing here?" She shivered, drew Spade's overcoat closer around her, and yawned. "You told me to stay till you got back or phoned." "Oh, you're the sister of the boy who stood on the burning deck." "I wasn't going to." She broke off and stood up, letting his coat slide down on the chair behind her. She looked with dark excited eyes at his temple under the brim of his hat and exclaimed, "Oh, your head. What happened?" His right temple was dark and swollen. "I don't know whether I fell or was slugged. I don't think it amounts to much, but it hurts like hell." He barely touched it with his fingers, flinched, turned his grimace into a grim smile, and explained, "I went visiting, was fed knockout drops, and came to 12 hours later all spread out on a man's floor." She reached up and removed his hat from his head. "It's terrible," she said. "You'll have to get a doctor. You can't walk around with a head like that. It's not as bad as it looks, except for the headache, and that might be mostly from the drops." He went to the cabinet in the corner of the office and ran cold water on a handkerchief. "Anything turn up after I left?" "Did you find Miss O'Shaughnessy, Sam?" "Not yet." "Anything turn up after I left?" "The district attorney's office phoned. He wants to see you himself." "Yes, that's the way I understood it. And a boy came in with a message that Mr. Gutman would be delighted to talk to you before 5:30. Spade turned off the water, squeezed the handkerchief, and came away from the cabinet, holding the handkerchief to his temple. "I got that," he said. "I met the boy downstairs, and talking to Mr. Gutman got me this." "Is that the G who phoned, Sam?" "Yes." "And what?" Spade stared through the girl and spoke as if using speech to arrange his thoughts. "He wants something he thinks I can get. I persuaded him I could keep him from getting it if he didn't make the deal with me before 5:30. Then sure it was after I told him he'd have to wait a couple of days that he fed me the junk. It's not likely he thought I'd die. He'd know I'd be up and around in 10 or 12 hours. So maybe the answer's that he figured he could get it without my help in that time if I was fixed so I couldn't butt in." He scowled. "I hope to Christ he was wrong." His stare became less distant. "You didn't get any word from the O'Shaughnessy?" The girl shook her head no and asked, "Has this got anything to do with her?" "Something. This thing he wants belongs to her. Or to the King of Spain. Sweetheart, you've got an uncle who teaches history or something over at the university. A cousin. Why? If we brightened his life with an alleged historical secret 4 centuries old, could we trust him to keep it dark a while?" "Oh, yes, he's good people." "Fine. Get your pencil and book." She got them and sat in her chair. Spade ran more cold water on his handkerchief and, holding it to his temple, stood in front of her and dictated the story of the Falcon as he had heard it from Gutman, from Charles V's grant to the Hospitallers up to but no further than the enameled bird's arrival in Paris at the time of the Carlist influx. He stumbled over the names of authors and their works that Gutman had mentioned, but managed to achieve some sort of phonetic likeness. The rest of the history he repeated with the accuracy of a trained interviewer. When he had finished, the girl shut her notebook and raised a flushed, smiling face to him. "Oh, isn't this thrilling?" she said. "It's... yes, or ridiculous. Now will you take it over and read it to your cousin and ask him what he thinks of it? Has he ever run across anything that might have some connection with it? Is it probable? Is it possible? Even barely possible? Or is it the bunk if he wants more time to look it up? Okay, but get some sort of opinion out of him now. And for God's sake, make him keep it under his hat." "I'll go right now," she said, "and you go see a doctor about that head. We'll have breakfast first." "No, I'll eat over in Berkeley. I can't wait to hear what Ted thinks of this." "Well," Spade said, "don't start boo-hooing if he laughs at you." After a leisurely breakfast at the palace, during which he read both morning papers, Spade went home, shaved, bathed, rubbed ice on his bruised temple, and put on fresh clothes. He went to Bridget O'Shaughnessy's apartment at the Coronet. Nobody was in the apartment. Nothing had been changed in it since his last visit. He went to the Alexandria Hotel. Gutman was not in. None of the other occupants of Gutman's suite was in. Spade learned that these other occupants were the fat man's secretary, Wilmer Cook, and his daughter Rhea, a brown-eyed, fair-haired, smallish girl of 17 whom the hotel staff said was beautiful. Spade was told that the Gutman party had arrived at the hotel, from New York, 10 days before, and had not checked out. Spade went to the Belvedere and found the hotel detective eating in the hotel cafe. "Morning, Sam. Sit down and bite an egg." The hotel detective stared at Spade's temple. "By God, somebody maced you plenty." "Thanks, I've had mine," Spade said as he sat down, and then, referring to his temple, "It looks worse than it is. How's my Cairo's conduct? He went out not more than half an hour behind you yesterday and I ain't seen him since. He didn't sleep here again last night. He's getting bad habits." "Well, a fellow like that alone in a big city. Who put the slug to you, Sam?" "It wasn't Cairo." Spade looked attentively at the small silver dome covering Luke's toast. "How's chances of giving his room a casing while he's out?" "Can do. You know I'm willing to go all the way with you all the time." Luke pushed his coffee back, put his elbows on the table, and screwed up his eyes at Spade. "But I got a hunch. You ain't going all the way with me. What's the honest to God on this guy, Sam? You don't have to kick back on me. You know I'm regular." Spade lifted his eyes from the silver dome. They were clear and candid. "Sure, you are," he said. "I'm not holding out. I gave you it straight. I'm doing a job for him, but he's got some friends that look wrong to me and I'm a little leery of him. The kid we chased out yesterday was one of his friends." "Yes, Luke, he was. And it was one of them that shoved Miles across." Spade shook his head. "Thursby killed Miles. And who killed him?" Spade smiled. "That's supposed to be a secret, but, confidentially, I did," he said, "according to the police." Luke grunted and stood up saying, "You're a tough one to figure out, Sam. Come on, we'll have that look-see." They stopped at the desk long enough for Luke to fix it so we'll get a ring if he comes in, and went up to Cairo's room. Cairo's bed was smooth and trim, but paper in wastebasket, unevenly drawn blinds, and a couple of rumpled towels in the bathroom showed that the chambermaid had not yet been in that morning. Cairn's luggage consisted of a square trunk, a valise, and a Gladstone bag. His bathroom cabinet was stocked with cosmetics boxes, cans, jars, and bottles of powders, creams, unguents, perfumes, lotions, and tonics. 2 suits and an overcoat hung in the closet over 3 pairs of carefully treated shoes. The valise and smaller bag were unlocked. Luke had the trunk unlocked by the time Spade had finished searching elsewhere. "Blank so far," Spade said as they dug down into the trunk. "They found nothing there to interest them." "Any particular thing we're supposed to be looking for?" Luke asked as he locked the trunk again. "No. He's supposed to have come here from Constantinople. I'd like to know if he did. I haven't seen anything that says he didn't." "What's his racket?" Spade shook his head. "That's something else I'd like to know. He crossed the room and bent down over the wastebasket. Well, this is our last shot. He took a newspaper from the basket. His eyes brightened when he saw it was the previous day's call. It was folded with the classified advertising page outside. He opened it, examined that page, and nothing there stopped his eyes. He turned the paper over and looked at the page that had been folded inside, the page that held financial and shipping news, the weather, births, marriages, divorces, and deaths. From the lower left-hand corner, a little more than 2 inches of the bottom of the second column had been torn out. Immediately above the tier was a small caption, "Arrived today," followed by 12:20 a.m. Capac from Astoria. 5:05 a.m. Helen P. Drew from Greenwood. 5:06 a.m. Alvarado from Bandon. The tier passed through the next line, leaving only enough of its letters to make from Sydney inferable. Spade put the call down on the desk and looked into the wastebasket again. He found a small piece of wrapping paper, a piece of string, 2 hosiery tags, a haberdasher's sale ticket for half a dozen pairs of socks, and, in the bottom of the basket, a piece of newspaper rolled into a tiny ball. He opened the ball carefully, smoothed it out on the desk, and fitted it into the torn part of the call. The fit at the sides was exact, but between the top of the crumpled fragment and the inferable from Sydney half an inch was missing, sufficient space to have held announcement of 6 or 7 boats' arrival. He turned the sheet over and saw that the other side of the missing portion could have held only a meaningless corner of a stockbroker's advertisement. Luke, leaning over his shoulder, asked, "What's this all about? Looks like the gent's interested in a boat." "Well, there's no law against that, or is there?" Luke said while Spade was folding the torn page and the crumpled fragment together and putting them into his coat pocket. "You all through here now?" "Yes. Thanks a lot, Luke. Will you give me a ring as soon as he comes in?" "Sure." Spade went to the business office of the Call, bought a copy of the previous day's issue, opened it to the shipping news page, and compared it with the page taken from Cairo's wastebasket. The missing portion had read, 5:17 a.m. Tahiti from Sydney and Papeete. 6:05 a.m. Admiral Peoples from Astoria. 8:07 a.m. Catapeak from San Pedro. 8:17 a.m. Silverado from San Pedro. 8:05 a.m. La Paloma from Hong Kong. 9:03 a.m. Daisy Gray from Seattle. He read the list slowly, and when he had finished he underscored Hong Kong with a fingernail, cut the list of arrivals from the paper with his pocket knife, put the rest of the paper and Cairo's sheet into the wastebasket, and returned to his office. He sat down at his desk, looked up a number in the telephone book, and used the telephone. "Carney 1401, please, where is the Paloma? In from Hong Kong yesterday." "Morning, Doc." He repeated the question. "Thanks." He held the receiver hook down with his thumb for a moment, released it, and said, "Davenport 2020, please. Detective Bureau, please. Is Sergeant Paulhouse there? Thanks." "Hello, Tom, this is Sam Spade." "Yes, I tried to get you yesterday afternoon." "Sure, suppose you go to lunch with me." "Right." He kept the receiver to his ear while his thumb worked the hook again. "Davenport 0170, please. Hello, this is Samuel Spade. My secretary got a phone message yesterday that Mr. Bryan wanted to see me. Will you ask him what time's the most convenient for him?" "Yes, Spade, Spade. A long pause. "Yes. 2:30 all. Right. Thanks." He called a fifth number and said, "Hello, darling, let me talk to Sid." "Hello, Sid. Sam. I've got a date with the district attorney at 2:30 this afternoon. Will you give me a ring here or there around 4, just to see that I'm not in trouble hell with your Saturday afternoon golf? Your job's to keep me out of jail." "Right, Sid. But..." He pushed the telephone away, yawned, stretched, felt his bruised temple, looked at his watch, and rolled and lighted a cigarette. He smoked sleepily until Effie Perrin came in. Effie Perrin came in smiling, bright-eyed and rosy-faced. "Ted says it could be," she reported, and he hopes it is. He says he's not a specialist in that field, but the names and dates are all right, and at least none of your authorities or their works are out and out fakes. He's all excited over it. That's swell, as long as he doesn't get too enthusiastic to see through it if it's phony. Oh, he wouldn't not Ted. He's too good at his stuff for that. The whole damned Perrin family's wonderful, Spade said, including you and the smudge of soot on your nose. He's not a Perrin, he's a Christie. She bent her head to look at her nose in her vanity case mirror. I must have got that from the fire. She scrubbed the smudge with the corner of a handkerchief. The Perrin Christie enthusiasm ignite Berkeley, he asked. She made a face at him while patting her nose with a powdered pink disc. There was a boat on fire when I came back. They were towing it out from the pier and the smoke blew all over our ferry boat. Spade put his hands on the arms of his chair. Were you near enough to see the name of the boat, he asked. Yes. La Paloma. Why? Spade smiled ruefully. I'm damned if I know why, sister, he said.